This is the third part of an interview with Dr. Tom Zinser, which was recorded in Grand Rapids, Michigan on the 20th of May 2019. I'm here with Dr. Tom Zinser, and we're talking about his book, Soul-Centered Healing, a psychologist's extraordinary journey into the realms of subpersonalities, spirits, and past lives. And in the session we've just had, Tom, we were talking about Gerard's perspective on the concept of darkness, light and darkness, how the two work together. And we then just started to touch into the whole question of evil. So I'm interested to hear Gerard's view on your view and experience in relationship to your understanding of how evil affects spirits and souls, and the way that impacts upon us and some of your clients, I guess.
It's a big issue. It's a powerful issue, and it's one that I explored deeply with Jared because of the kinds of issues I worked with in terms of trauma and pain and fear and terror. So we talked about darkness, dealt with darkness a lot. In terms of evil, when I talked with him about it and trying to understand how he would view evil, the one thing he told me was that evil occurs when one soul violates the free choice of another.
Right.
He said the free choice was the divine's absolute promise. That's part of who we are as souls.
Yes.
You can't give away your free choice. And he said when one soul violates that choice of another soul, that's where evil happens. And it's not like talking about a parent violating a child's choice and making them go to bed at night. And I don't think it's necessarily talking about somebody who maybe burglarizes somebody's home. That may be dark, and that person may be caught up in darkness. I don't know that it's necessarily evil.
So it's quite a clear sort of, well, not maybe clear.
Yeah, I don't think it is always clear, because burglarizing somebody's home could be evil.
Yes.
But the issue of violating a soul's choice would be like holding somebody captive against their will, abusing them in some way or enslaving them in some way without any recognition of themselves as a soul or having free choice.
Right.
So I don't know that the line is always clear, but that issue of violating a soul, I think, was core to what Jared talked about as evil.
So deliberate abuse in childhood could be regarded as evil.
Yes. But again, it's part of the problem. A parent may abuse a child, but out of ignorance and their own emotional problems and how they grew up, and they're not intentionally abusing and causing evil to the child. A lot of ignorance.
Yes.
Then I don't know that we're talking evil. We're still talking abuse.
Yes.
And a parent like that would need to be brought to the attention of authorities.
Yes.
But in terms of evil, it's as though you are very intentionally focused and concentrated on taking action against a soul that is going to violate it for your gain. So it's not always clear cut. But on another level, there's a difference between darkness and evil.
Yes.
I've often thought, since talking with Jared, what we understand as the mafia, organized crime, the Cosa Nostra, that would be evil because of the way it is intended And the other interesting thing about it is the way evil wants to draw others into it, and then keeps them in it under threat, threatening a family. So the mafia, I think, is a pretty good analogy.
Yes, I presume sort of the Nazi regime would be,
Yes.
another one.
And it may not be very good politics, but I would say North Korea
Yes.
is an example
Yes.
of evil.
Mm.
So I think each of us as a soul and as a person, that's where we have to account for ourselves.
Yes.
And we can get caught in darkness and we can struggle with darkness, and we have lessons to learn involving darkness. But evil is another magnitude, I think.
And presumably from the client's perspective, it's where dark spirits, or even, should we call them evil spirits, attach to the psyche, that opens up another whole difficult area that needs to be addressed.
Yes, I would say, in trying to be brief, Jared is saying that souls that have gone into darkness are still souls of light.
Yes.
And they still need the light energy
Yes.
to survive.
Yes.
And when a soul gets pulled into darkness or gets lost in darkness or gets caught up in it, and they leave the light, they still need to get some.
Yeah.
And that this is where spirit attachment by dark souls, not just earthbound spirits or lost spirits, but really dark souls, do attach and do attempt to gain energy. And as Jared called it, we humans are stepped down light energy when we come into the body. So we're stepped down light energy, and that stepped down level is where dark souls can try to get their light. They won't go into the divine light.
No.
They won't go into the spirit realm of light. They will try to take the light from this level and from humans. So in order to do that, they will carry out a lot of different strategies to attach or intrude or affect someone who's vulnerable in the physical. And this is one of the problems about the working in this area of therapy and healing, is that when you're dealing with clients who were abused as children or adolescents, you're talking about children who have been vulnerable because of the pain, or maybe because they did, in the inner world, try to escape into that darkness, hide from the abuse. They become vulnerable to those spirits that are seeking light or control. And so that is a big issue.
And you're suggesting that these spirits can sometimes attach to a traumatized part and then influence that traumatized part at some level.
Yes. The way that I view it, having worked with Jared, it's not the way everyone views it in this area. And there are a number of therapists who are recognizing this issue of spirit attachment. The way that I understood it in working with Jared and my clients is that there are spirits who can attach to the self, but it's almost like they're attached from outside and can interact at this psychic level and influence at this psychic level. But there are other spirits, and maybe more, I don't know how to describe them, but they're able to enter one's energy. In that sense, they're operating from within the soul at some level.
I have an experience in my own clinical practice of a traumatized 4-year-old part where a dark spirit turned up and presented itself as a child's friend.
Yes.
And befriended that
Yes.
part. And it was only much later on, when I was working with the client, that we were able to identify the child as this gateway for
Yes.
this dark entity, and the child didn't want to let it go because it was from her perspective, it was her friend. It had been there to support her at that time. Is that the sort of thing that you mean in this sort of case?
That's exactly one of the big kind of ways that this can happen. A point that Jared certainly made about this free choice issue is that for an outside spirit or some other entity to access or attach to a person in this way, there has to be an agreement by the soul.
Mm.
And that's a very big statement, and I would suggest people really think about it, that there has to be a permission. Spirits cannot just walk into your energy. They can't just come and run over you. But what you're describing and what I would see so often is the deception that's used and the tactics used to get a permission from a level of the self that doesn't understand the bigger picture of being in the body and having a life.
Yes, indeed.
So in that sense, yes, these spirits can come and they can offer a toy to a child ego state. I had another man I worked with, had a 12 or 13-year-old dark spirit, gave him a knife. This little 12-year-old subpersonality gave him a knife for his protection. As long as he held on to that knife, it was an access for the spirits. In my work with him, when I got to the point of asking the child to give up that knife, it was going to be okay to give up that knife, he didn't want to do it at first. He finally did and was able to move into the light. But it's that kind of tactics and strategies and deceptions that these dark ones used on vulnerabilities to gain what they technically see as a permission or an agreement. As Jared would say, it can be a permission, but if that is brought into consciousness and the soul says no, that spirit will either have to leave on its own or it will be removed.
Right.
But so often this issue of access is not recognized in our field as very, very important. When I work to have spirits released, I will always work with higher self afterwards to look for any accesses. And there can be more than one access. So it can get complex depending on how sophisticated a particular spirit is. A lot of spirits in darkness are not real, experienced or sophisticated in their knowledge. But some are. And they can even run a whole lot of spirits.
Right. So you're suggesting a sort of almost hierarchy of dark spirits at some level.
Yes, I wouldn't be in a position to talk about how often that happens. But in my experience, it's often enough. And that hierarchy is what also makes healing very difficult. And this is why I talk about the mafia. The head of the Godfather will keep the foot soldiers in line and will give them their marching orders and will punish them if they get out of line. In the spirit realm, these dark souls operate in the same way. There are those at the top of the hierarchy who in a sense have this huge energy source if they've gathered souls into their darkness, and they will keep them in line. So when you have a client where there are dark souls involved, you're going to be in a struggle. They do not want to give up their territory. You're trying to take back territory. And so you have to be able to deal with how to sever that.
Right.
And again, it gets very complex in terms of the strategies used. But this issue of having a permission and a vulnerability, I'd look at almost as generally true.
Right, okay. But if in that permission, the soul or the part revokes that permission and says it wants to be back in the light, then whatever that dark energy is, it has to go.
It has to go or it will be removed. And I've seen that happen in a very powerful way. Dark spirits who do resist right to the end. So we find the accesses instead. And once that has happened, they have higher self use the light and just remove it. And it's removed.
Yes.
Without dealing with those accesses, it's like you can go around in circles wondering how to get rid of this.
So it's funny. Would you say access and anchor is the same thing, or that it's like attached to a part of the psyche?
Yeah, I guess I would use access in the sense that it's a broader category.
Yes.
Because lots of things can be used as an access. Like the knife is used for this kid, and a
Yes.
doll might be used for this child. An anchor almost would be what I would call finding a device.
Right.
And it is almost like that. An anchor is thrown and hooked into the soul, and it remains there as that anchor.
Yes.
And that would need to be removed.
Yeah.
When you're talking about, but that anchor got in there for some reason.
Yes.
Again, it didn't just get anchored in there because that spirit said, "Oh, this looks like a good place to do it." There was a vulnerability there.
Yes.
Again. So you still would go back to find that vulnerability when you've taken that anchor out.
Yes, right. And again, just opening up a little bit, presumably there's going to be cases where people have had engaged in darkness at some level from past lives, and that again could, would that again also provide a sort of gateway in for trauma in the current life?
Past lives adds another whole dimension to the healing process. That at this level, I look at the soul more as a tapestry with many threads, many themes that are being woven together over lifetimes, as we talked about, for that awakening. And some of that tapestry is going to, I think, yes, involve evil, where past life parts have become vulnerable or become involved with evil, where in later lifetimes or in one's present life, that is still having to be worked out. And that is not unusual. Whether you have to work to that level and what level you do have to work with for healing and release is an individual question. Not everybody has to work at that level. But if you need to, you may have to go that deep to work with what I would call some entanglements that have occurred with darkness.
Yeah.
And dark souls, if again they're sophisticated, they will access someone in present life based on the past life vulnerability and then build on that in the present life.
Right.
So that it adds to the entanglement for the next life coming.
Right.
And pretty soon you've got a hard knot to try to untangle.
Yes, yes, yes.
So yes, past lives can very much be a part of the blocks and entanglements and pain and confusion. But it gets to be an individual story again.
So presumably these sorts of cases are not just going to be dealt with in a few sessions. They're going to require a lot of ongoing support and help and therapy.
Yes. If there is an evil or very dark entanglement, it's not going to be one or two sessions. And it's just, I think that's just the way it is.
Okay. In all of that, one of the interesting things from what I gather from you and from Gerald, and certainly from my own experience, is that the higher self has an overview of all of this, but won't just step in to sort it all out. I mean, it's somehow we as the incarnate soul need to engage and sort out these areas. Is that the way you would see this?
I would agree with that. I think the higher self may carry out actions on its own that in a sense are part of what it is.
Yes.
But I don't know that the higher self is always aware of what it's capable of in this physical level.
Right.
And there are limits to what it can do.
Mm.
But it is always wanting to promote healing.
Yes.
It's always wanting to promote greater connection with the light of the soul and the divine. But for the most part, I would say, yes, we as individuals can learn, and I think it would be helpful to be able to engage that higher self directly in our consciousness. Trust that it's there.
Yes.
And come, maybe in meditation, in prayer, in one's own kind of rituals, be able to make direct contact with higher self, become cooperative with it, and to ask it for information that it can give. Don't ask whether you should take this particular job, but you can ask for more light.
Yes.
You can ask that higher levels
Yes.
become involved in guiding,
Yes.
even though you will have to make the choice.
Yes. Yes.
So yes, I think one's relationship with their higher self can really be strengthened, if not actually opened up for people. Higher self can get blocked. Higher self can almost be pushed into a corner by things going on with maybe abuse or outside spirits. It's almost like it's suppressed. And that's where it'll stay until given the okay to come forward.
Well, presumably someone who has a very strong ego and is ego-centered wouldn't necessarily have an awareness of this higher self part, and that could create a blockage.
Yes.
To it.
If one denies that,
Yes.
and really actively denies it, yes, it can be a block, and it can be a disconnect
Yes.
from the soul
Yes.
in varying depths, and some can be pretty deep disconnections. And again, I think that can often happen because somebody has been abused or mistreated, or growing up got lost and confused about things. Maybe did not feel loved. So there are reasons someone may get disconnected, or that higher self may get pushed into a corner. And when I'm working with someone, just making contact with higher self, communicating with higher self, letting it become more active, is already going to be a big step forward.
Yes. Yes. I would certainly feel that, and I guess from a meditative perspective, we can all have a sense of however we choose to do it, of connecting into this wise part of ourself, and acknowledging that this higher self is there and can support us in its way.
I have no question about that, and I would say you could go on the internet and find many people describing different techniques and ways to connect with higher self. And I think there's lots of ways to do it. Different people may need different kind of modalities, but I think that's there. Different strategies for making that connection.
And I think that's incredibly exciting, isn't it, Tom?
It is.
You know,
It is.
Because we don't have to be in trauma to actually have a sense that there is a part of us that has this, overlighting wisdom that can be there to support the things which we do. Ultimately, as you say, we need to make the choices, but
Yes.
It can bring up options or opportunities for
Yeah.
us.
What you just kind of triggered my memory of talking at one point with a man named David Cheeks,
Yeah.
who was very big in this field, especially about dissociation and hypnosis. And I had shared with him my work. At one point we talked, and he got back to me, and he talked about how much he liked the work, but he said one of the most important things he saw in this was bringing forward this higher self concept and that would be very important.
Mm.
And we agreed on that. That was big.
Certainly, from my perspective, I think
Mm.
it is. It's absolutely fundamental to who we are, and if we can begin to make that connection, it certainly transforms our lives in all sorts of ways. It
Yeah.
certainly has mine.
And mine.
Yes,
Yeah.
in a very deep, rich way. Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you, Tom, for sharing so much
Well,
of
you're
all of
welcome.
this. And I would highly recommend Tom's book. And there's actually 2 others that go with this, so it's a set of 3. But this one particularly, Soul-Centered Healing, a psychologist's extraordinary journey into the realms of subpersonalities and past lives, by Dr. Tom Zinser. And it's certainly available on Amazon, I guess.
Yes, anywhere really. Bookstores or online.
Yeah, excellent. So thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.